again. Today, as you can see, we've got a change of scene. Some of you have written in and asked if Anne and I can give you some advice on car maintenance. Of course, it goes without saying that Anne and I are not mechanics, but the sort of problems we'll be dealing with and the advice we'll be giving is about something that any driver would be able to handle.
Yes, and although not everyone drives a car, most of us travel in them from time to time. And if you know the right thing to do in an emergency, you'll be a very welcome passenger. However, if you do drive, it's possible that you will be on your own when trouble arises. And generally, if you've my kind of luck, it'll be in a remote spot, late at night, and it will probably be raining.
Well, in an earlier programme, I had to unblock a sink, so this time Anne's getting the dirty job.
Thank you.
What she's going to do is change a wheel. There isn't anything more fundamental for a driver than a puncture, and it's something which is almost bound to happen with every driver at some stage of their driving experience. Obviously, you won't get any warning, and it can bring you down to earth in every sense. It's not always possible to get help, and this is something certainly within the scope of the average female.
Well, I'm the average female, and the first thing you notice when you're driving is the noise or the change in the feel of the steering. The car is inclined to wander or to move to one side, and if it goes right down to the rim, you'll be able to hear it. The first thing, if possible, is to get off the road. You mustn't drive any distance with a flat tire. For one thing, well, you'll ruin it, and for another, it's unsafe because you don't have full control of the car. Try to get away from the traffic and, if possible, onto a flat, hard surface like a lay-by. Do try to get off a busy road. If there's no hard standing or lay-by, pull into a side street away from the main street of traffic.
Well, the situation now is that you've got a flat tire. You're away from the mainstream of traffic, so over to you, Anne.
Right, let's deal with the safety aspects first. Now, this is a warning triangle, which is very useful to have in your car. As you can see, it packs flat. You can keep it in the boot of the car. Then when an emergency happens, you can unfold it, and here you have the triangle. Now, it's covered with reflector glass, and the best place is to have it about 15 yards behind your car, facing the oncoming traffic, so that a car coming in your direction realizes there's a hazard, he knows to overtake. We don't have 15 yards in the garage here to put it behind the car, so I'll simply lay it down here, and then you can see the effect it would have. That being done, the next thing is to turn on the hazard warning lights in your car, if they do have it, and of course to check that the handbrake is on. So I'll put on the hazard warning lights in this one. Oops. Oh, the handbrake. Yeah, the handbrake is on. The hazard warning lights are on. Now, we have here a wedge. This is useful to put in the wheel, but of course, if you don't have one, a stone, a piece of wood, something you find at the roadside would be useful, especially if you're parked on a slope. Now, if your car is facing up the hill, you would put the wedge behind the wheel. If it's facing down the hill, you would put it in the front. And if you have just one wedge, you put it on the wheel diagonally opposite the one to be repaired. Now, in our car here, we're to be changing the wheel of the back rear wheel. So diagonally opposite is the front one at this side, so this is where I'll put the wedge. Right, having taken all the necessary precautions, nothing left for me now but to change the wheel. As you see, we have a flat tire. The first thing to do is to take your spare tire out of the boot of the car and check that it has been inflated. This is very firm, so this is all right to replace the flat tire. Next thing to do is to take out the bag of tools from the boot. Now, for lots of you, this is probably the first time you've had to look inside this little bag of tricks. So let's see what it's going to offer you. Two things in this case. The jack, which is for lifting the car, and the wheel brace, which is for undoing the nuts on the wheel. There are other things which, although not in the standard kit, are useful to have in a case of an emergency like this. And the first one is some sort of torch. Now, this is a particularly good one because it has an orange light which acts like a hazard light if you set it to the side of your car. It also has a light to give you some light because you won't necessarily have an emergency in the daylight. So this would be a particularly useful one to have. We'll set it aside because we don't need it at the moment. Then another thing which is useful, and it doesn't really take up any room in the boot of your car, is a piece of wood. It may well be that when you come to change the tire, you're not in a hard road, you're not in a solid sort of surface like this. It may be a grassy verge, so the piece of wood would take the weight of the jack. Now, coming to the jack, there is always in every car the proper place to jack up the car, and that's called the jacking point. And to know where that is, you may have to consult the handbook, which I hope you would keep in the glove compartment or something. Check the handbook, find where the jacking up point is in your car, or if you can't find that, get down on your hands and knees and look underneath. Now, in this car, back here beside the wheel, there are 2 holes, and it's through these holes that we put the jack. Now, let's see. This is the jack. It has this bit at right angles and the handle for winding it up. So I fix this through the holes. Now, you can see the use of the piece of wood. That's put in. That's in place. And I'm simply going to jack it enough to make the jack firm, but not, in fact, at this stage, to lift the wheel off the ground. Now, I've always to remember, clockwise lifts it, so this is the way I go. So it's just a case of turning the handle until the jack feels very firm. That seems all right. That's it. The jack doesn't move, so we can leave it at that. And now comes perhaps the most difficult part in the whole business, especially for ladies, because you have to undo these nuts which hold the wheel on. Now, they have probably been fixed on by a very strong gentleman with strong hands and arms, and how are we going to take them off? In this car, there is a central hubcap, and then 4 little rubber caps covering the nuts. So we'll take them off, and I'll put them into the middle one so that I don't lose them. Fine. 4. And I have to undo the nuts. Now, this is the tool provided. It doesn't have a very long arm, but we'll see how we get on with it. I think I better stand to this. I don't have a lot of leverage in this, so if you have a piece of conduit piping, this gives you, in conjunction with the wheel brace, more leverage, so that if you stand up, you can just about get it. Good. Now, I'm not taking the nuts off, but just loosening them enough. Now, it's good practice just to do the opposite ones, because that's what you've got to do when you tighten them. Right. That's it. You can see how the short handle doesn't give you a lot of leverage. That's it. Now, I have another wheel brace to show you. This is one which you can buy at any accessory shop, and it has it accommodates 4 different sizes of nut. I know that the one for this size is opposite the label, so I know it's this one, and I think that's the one I haven't done. No, this one. You can see with the crossbar, I can use 2 hands, and that's it. But that really is quite hard work getting these things loosened. They're only loosened, so I'll leave it at that, and then I continue jacking up the car until the wheel is completely away from the ground. Now, it's clockwise to lift it, which is that way. Surprisingly easy doing this, it's like working a mincer. Now I can see the tire was flat. Ground looks normal. Yes, it's off the ground. So I now can take the wheel off. So I may be able to do it with my fingers. Yes. 4 nuts to take off and keep them in a safe place because you'll certainly require them again. Three. 4. Take off the wheel, put it aside because it'll have to be repaired. And take the good one. Check that you get the right side of it. The right side you will know because, of course, the valve is in the outside. And then you have 4 holes in the wheel, which you have to align with the 4 studs on the car. So that's the only tricky bit, lifting the wheel so that the studs come through the holes. Right, see how we get on with that. Right. It's quite a heavy job. When it's on, the nuts go back in place, and notice that the nuts have a flat side and a rounded side, but the flat side is at the outside. So these can just go on by hand. Enough to keep the wheel on. Three. I'll tighten these a bit, but not fully, because I wait until the weight of the car is on the wheel. So I have to wait until I remove the jack. Okay, the wheel seems perfectly firm. Now I take out the jack, and it's anti-clockwise to let it down. Right. I just keep turning away like this until the jack feels loose in my hand. Okay, that was quite painless. The full weight of the car is on the wheel, so now I can tighten the nuts. But I'm advised not to use the extension bit of conduit because that would make the nuts so tight that perhaps the next time I wanted to take them off, I would be unable to do them. So I'm simply going to make them as hard as I can by just using my own strength. Right, nuts are on. Replace the little plastic caps. First, the individual ones. This type of car has individual caps for the nuts and a central cap, but sometimes there's just one big hub cap, which does them all. Now, how's that? Everything is done. What I must do now is to tidy up the tools, put them back in the boot, along with the wheel, and of course not forgetting to collect the triangle, which is 15 yards down the road, the warning triangle, and put it in the boot as well. Right. Well, that seems quite a bother, but it's nothing to the problem, which can be caused by being stranded on your way to an important appointment, or having to wait a long time at the side of the road for professional assistance and having to spend pounds for their help. But do remember to take your tyre back to the garage to have it repaired.
Changing a wheel is one of those jobs you hope you'll never have to do, but it always seems to happen when you least expect it. And another problem with the car, which falls into the same kind of category, is when it refuses to start. Now, this can mean a few things, but I think as far as we're concerned, what we should try to do is recognise when it's due to a flat battery. This is usually recognizable by the lack of kick from the starter when you attempt to start the car. In other words, there isn't enough power to turn the engine over and get the thing started. Another clue is to put on your lights, and if they look very dim, then it generally means a flat battery. Don't go on trying to start the car with a flat battery. It'll only make things 50 times worse. Your answer to this problem is to use jump leads. And here in the boot of the car, I have got a set. And as you can see, they consist of two cables, a red one and a black one, with clips at either end. These can be used whenever there's another car in the immediate vicinity with a good battery and a willing driver, of course. And your first job is to find the batteries. And for this, you may need to consult the handbook. Then line up the cars in a convenient position. And the sequence of events is as follows. And this is most important. Switch off both the engines, all the lights, and the ignition. Now, since most modern cars have alternators instead of dynamos for charging the battery, the wisest policy is to disconnect the flat battery to protect the alternators. And I'm going to do that in this car, which has the flat battery, by lifting off the red lead. That's the live lead to the battery. Now, you proceed as follows. Connect the red clip to this terminal, the one that you've just disconnected from the car, first of all, and then go to the car with the good battery and connect red to red, which is the live or positive terminal there. Be careful not to touch any of the metal parts of the car. Then you take the black one and repeat the procedure. Black to black. Again, avoid touching any of the metal parts. And black to the negative terminal on this car. Now, the idea now is that you're going to charge the flat battery from the good one. And in order to do this, you turn on the engine of this car, start it up, and allow it to run for a minimum of 5 minutes to allow this battery to charge. Now, we don't want to leave cars running in an enclosed space like a garage, and you don't want to spend 5 minutes watching it, so we will assume that our 5 minutes is up. The next step, and again most important, is to switch off the engine of the car with the good battery, and then disconnect in the reverse order. Take the live one off first here, and the live one off here. Put these away in the car later. Then the black one and the black one here. Now, don't forget, of course, that you've now got to connect up your positive terminal here, or you can't expect very much to happen. Then all you have to do, hopefully, is to climb into your car and start it up. You'll have enough charge for that. The next thing you must do is give the car a good run, and as soon as possible, get it to the garage to be checked up to make sure the battery's not faulty. Jump leads are extremely useful, and you can buy them in any car accessory shop. They'll cost you about £1.75. However, it isn't always the case that the battery's flat, and the problem could be that damp has got into the engine. So I think Anne has something to say about this.
Yes. Well, if your battery is okay and your car won't start, it's probably damp. At this stage, there's not a great deal of point in spraying your car with the many aerosol cans which give protection against damp. The point is that these are ideally suited for prevention, but not cure, and they should be used before your car gets damp, not after it. What you should do periodically is to clean the leads, the sparking plugs, the distributor, and the leads to the coil prior to the onset of damp weather, and then spray. Now let's lift the bonnet, let's see where we find all these things. These coils, these leads, they look rather like bits of electrical cable. These are the leads and should be, each one, cleaned very thoroughly to remove any particles of damp, because the damp, the grime, the petrol and so on combine together to cause the car to work less efficiently. Now, the leads go down to the sparking plugs, and if I take one out, perhaps you can see the sparking plug is down at the bottom. Only do these one at a time so that you get the correct lead to the correct sparking plug. And in the same way, clean the plug, clean the lead, and replace it. At the other side, the distributor head should be thoroughly wiped. And the lead to the coil. And when all these things are properly cleaned, by that I mean really dry, then you can spray them with this solution, which can be bought at any car accessory shop. And this gives a flexible plastic covering to the leads, which protects them and seals them from water, petrol, condensation. So a good shake, and then spray. And when you've that done carefully, that should last for a whole season. Now, I see Muriel has a guest with her, so let's go and see what they're chatting about.
Well, with us today is Ken Duguid, Superintendent for the AA in the north of Scotland area. Ken, were you quite happy with the way we coped with our emergencies?
Reasonably well, yes. There is two things. One, if you do have a puncture, get it to a garage right away, immediately after you change it, and get the wheel changed back on. The other thing, the only thing that Anne didn't do there was that she should have tightened up the nuts, the opposite nuts, each time. 1, 2, 3, 4. This centralizes the wheel. Otherwise, she did very well.
Splendid, and I haven't managed to electrocute myself or anybody else.
True.
One thing, Ken, I do think people are likely to forget, and that's the spare tyre to keep it properly inflated. This is important, isn't it?
Yes, it is. You should check all the wheels regularly, weekly.
Yes.
And at the same time, you should just put the pressure gauge onto the spare wheel just to make sure that it's up as well, because they do gradually go down, and who knows, you may have a slow puncture in it.
You need to check the tread on the tyres too, don't you?
Check the tread in the tyres, and if there's any really uneven wear, get it along to the nearest tyre depot and get them to check the wheel alignment. The other thing is, and what you must always remember, is that if you're running around with bald tyres or below the legal limit, it's a totting up offence, because one tyre is one offence, 2 tyres is 2 offences, and so on. So if you have four bald tyres, you could lose your licence.
You could be in a lot of trouble. What about radials and cross plies? There's something we've got to be careful about here, isn't there?
You should never put radials and cross plies onto the same axle. If you're going to mix them up, then you should have on the front is cross ply, yes, on the rear radials, but never a radial and a cross ply.
And of course you'd be in a lot of trouble with your spare, wouldn't you?
You would be in trouble with your spare because you need 2 different spares.
So the answer is to have the same thing all round.
The same thing all round, either cross ply or all radial.
What about another quick rundown on regular checks? What are the things we should really attend to, you know, daily with the car?
Oil is a must. Water, that's another must, although many of them now have overflow.
Yes.
That you can pressurized systems that you can go back onto. Lights, even just giving the lights a clean over.
Yes.
But check them each day just to make sure that they're all right, because if they're not right, if there's any lights not working, then it's a chargeable offence. Everything you do now can be charged.
I think most of us probably aren't careful enough with these things.
That's true. And then the washer bottle, you want it filled up. And of course, during the winter, you should always put in some sort of antifreeze. Not antifreeze that you put in your radiator because it would damage paint.
Yes.
But a spoonful of methylated spirits.
Or you get special stuff.
Or you get special proprietary brands.
Well, thanks very much, Ken, for all your help. And I'm sure after all these hints and good advice, we'll be able to keep on the move, Anne.
Yes. Well, I hope you have learned something about your car today. I certainly have. One thing to remember is that it isn't good sense merely to drive it about without paying proper attention to simple maintenance. If you don't, it's very likely to let you down. I hope the things we have discussed today will prove useful to all female drivers watching, or males too, if it comes to that. In fact, why not get your handbook from the car now? Have a look at it, lift the bonnet and see if you can identify the various parts we've been talking about. And why not see where the jacking up point in your car is today? Don't wait for a puncture before you try to find out where it is. Well, that's all. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Goodbye.